Chapter 16. With each step, the earthy scent of decomposing leaves drifted into the air. He really liked that smell. As much as he enjoyed the action of the city, Cash also reveled in the quiet and peace that came with being in the woods. The unique sense of being the only people in the world. He could understand why the others loved it so. Laughter broke out. Standing in the dark, he heard the unmistakable sound of Teague's voice, followed by a retort from Finn. Another burst of laughter. No doubt they were teasing someone. Those two loved to pick. And they were great at it. They had a unique way with one another, a silent form of communication, a bond that Cash had never observed between two people before. That's how Teague and Finn have always been, how he hoped they would always be. He thought back to the first time he had ever set eyes on them, in an empty rest stop in the middle of nowhere. After recently parting ways with a trio of nomads, he found himself in Las Cruces, where he met a girl named Camille. She had long, dark brown hair, big brown eyes, and a gorgeous smile. The night before they met, she had stolen money from two of the meanest-looking guys he had ever seen. Cash knew this because they ran into him as they searched for her. Camille never said a word about it. The only thing she told him was that she was on her way to Austin to see her cousin. He knew she thought she had played him. What she didn't know was that he didn't care what angle she was working. He just wanted to sleep with her. He introduced her to the art of train hopping, and the two set out for Texas. They landed in a small town west of San Antonio. Still having a good distance to go before arriving at their destination, they snagged a ride from a man named Todd, tall and thin, with long, greasy blonde hair. He was perhaps one of the most sketchy-looking people Cash had ever met, and that was saying a lot. Todd babbled incoherently all the time. When he spoke, his words came out slurred, the surrounding air filled with the stench of stale tobacco and weed. He had a tendency to forget what he was saying mid-sentence, more than once. He used to use his knees to steer as he lit a cigarette. They careened down tree-lined country roads. Potholes dotted the asphalt. Water had washed out entire sections in the low areas, cutting the road down to a single lane. After traveling for over 2 hours, Cash couldn't stand it anymore. At the first sight of a gas station, he told Todd to pull over and let them out. There they stood, on a bleak strip of road in the middle of nowhere, Texas. Todd peeled out, kicking up a heavy cloud of dust and debris as he drove away. The little shop was closed, so Cash, needing to take a leak, wandered around the rear of the building. When he returned, he found Camille sitting on the curb beside the air pump, his pack suspiciously by her side. He wondered whether she had taken anything. That was how deep their relationship was. He didn't trust her. On the road, a sheriff's car rolled by. He stopped, turned on his lights, pulled a U-turn, and rolled into the driveway. Cash couldn't help but note the irony of it all. They drove for hours along that shithole road and saw nothing. Not one damn thing. They finally get away from the toothless hippie, and then a cop shows up. Of course he would. The deputy climbed out of his car and approached. "Howdy," he said. He stood 6 feet away, legs spread apart, left hand resting on his belt, while his right rested over his handgun, the strap on the holster already open. "You folks got some ID on y'all?" he asked. Just what he needed, thought Cash. He sighed, pulled his wallet from the side pocket of his pack, and handed the card over. The deputy scrutinized the ID, looking down at the card, then back at Cash. He smirked. Cash was very familiar with that grin. It was the same one everyone flashed when they found out his full birth name. He steeled himself for the incoming joke. Everyone had a joke. "Your mama a fan of country music by any chance?" he asked, struggling to hold back a laugh. Cash did not reply. It wasn't really a question. The deputy's face became serious once again. "Washington State? That's a long way away. How'd y'all end up here?" "We got a ride a few towns back," replied Cash. "Driver just dropped us off here a few minutes ago." Still holding on to Cash's ID, the deputy asked, "Where y'all heading?" Cash responded once again, "Austin." He glanced over at Camille, who had been dead silent the whole time. She did not look well. As though noticing her for the first time, the deputy turned and said, "You too, young lady. I'm gonna need to see some ID." Camille shot a terrified glance at Cash. Trembling, she jumped to her feet and bolted. "God damn it," cursed the deputy. "Stay there," he ordered, then ran after her. Time crept. Cash had no idea why she ran. He tried not to think of a reason. The possibilities were too many. All of them ended in him being arrested. Should I run the other way? He wondered. The thought was quickly swept aside when he recalled the deputy still had his ID. More nervous than he had been in a while, he waited. It didn't take long for them to return, Camille's face red and blotchy. Hands cuffed behind her back, tears streaming down her face, dried leaves in her hair. The deputy placed her inside the vehicle, then walked back over to Cash. "You gonna give me a problem?" he asked. His hand once again rested on the handle of his sidearm. Pissing off a Texas cop was not high on his list of things to do. Cash shook his head.
No, sir. That's a wise decision,
stated the deputy.
Now, stay put while I run these IDs.
He spun around and went back to his vehicle. The next couple of minutes ticked by like hours. Cash knew he didn't have any real reason to be worried, but, like a school kid in the principal's office, he worried anyway. He scraped his mind trying to see if he could find any reason at all that the officer would have cause to search him. He remembered a small baggie containing weed was in his left shirt pocket, just waiting for the deputy to come along and find it.
God, please do not let him check my pockets.
The officer climbed out of his vehicle. He opened the door to the back seat, leaned forward, and stated,
Camille Lynn, you are under arrest.
When he finished reading her rights, he paused and asked,
Do you understand these rights?
From where he sat, Cash could not hear her reply. The deputy closed the door and strode back over to Cash.
Please don't check my pocket, please don't check my pocket,
Cash begged repeatedly in his head, as though warding off an evil spirit or praying.
All right, Johnny, you're free to go,
said the deputy as he handed Cash's ID back to him. Cash was confused. He couldn't think.
What?
The deputy's words finally made sense.
Oh, okay, thanks,
he replied.
I suggest you not be here when I come back around in a couple hours,
the officer warned. Without another word, he got back into his vehicle and drove off. Cash stood there, silent. A cloud of dust and debris encircled him. When the dust settled, there was no sign of the cop or Camille. Just him, standing there in the middle of nowhere, alone. He picked up his pack and walked. As luck would have it, for Cash, there was always luck to be found. A truck rolled up. The driver, a friendly white-haired man in denim overalls, offered him a ride to the nearest rest stop. It was early evening when he was dropped off. The building was large, clean, and brand new. It even housed a modern storm shelter. Outside stood a tall water tower, play structure, and several vending machines. Unfortunately, there were no trucks anywhere. He sat down on the plastic slide and looked around. Until that moment, he hadn't realized how exhausted he was. Hungry, too. He pulled out his wallet. It was empty. All his money was gone. Well, damn. Camille had ripped him off. He couldn't really be angry about it, considering that some of that money came from her wallet the night before. Rifling around in his pack, he found the remains of a chocolate chip cookie. He shoved it in his mouth and scanned the area. The only vehicle in sight was a run-down tan sedan. Its occupant, a creepy man with pockmarked skin and greasy hair, sat transfixed, staring at someone on the other side of the building. Cash followed his gaze. Two teenagers sat under an old oak tree, one dark-haired, the other blonde. In their own private world, they laughed, wrestled, and talked, oblivious to everything. Cash looked around the facility again. No other cars. The rest stop was in the heart of nowhere. No large city nearby. No small city either. Where the hell did they come from? Cash glanced back at the creepy man, still watching, like a predator stalking prey. A chill ran up his spine. Inner conflict roiled. Should he warn those two teens? Should he do something? But if he could do anything, what would that be? Did he really want a confrontation after the whole run-in with the sheriff? Would it even be worth it? What if he was reading it all wrong? What if the creepy guy was really a friend of theirs?
That's probably what that is. No need to be concerned, Cash. It's none of your business anyway, so let it be.
He settled back on the slide, closed his eyes, and listened to the sound of the birds singing. A burst of laughter, and the sound of footsteps on the concrete walkway. Cash opened his eyes. The dark-haired teen was heading his way, bright smile on his face. He strolled past Cash, as though he wasn't there. His steps light and happy as he disappeared into the men's room. A car door creaked open. Cash watched as the creepy guy did his best to close the door as quietly as possible, fixated on the restroom. He glanced over at the other teen. Once again, Cash followed his gaze. The blonde one was busy reading a small paperback. He never even looked up as the creepy guy snuck into the men's room. Cash strained his ears, listening for... He didn't really know what for. Something. Anything. His heart pounded. The longer the silence, the more intense his heartbeat. Nervousness coursed throughout his body, creating energy that demanded to be discharged. Leg twitching. He ran his fingers through his hair. Shit. He peered over at the blonde teen. Nothing. Head still buried in his book.
Look up, dumbass.
His body was intent on making him move. Against his better judgment, Cash crept over to the men's room and placed his ear against the metal door. Bang! Something heavy, yet soft, hit the door from the inside, causing a vibration that bumped the door against his head. He pulled away. Muffled voices and scuffling ensued. His worst fears were being realized.
You are not seriously gonna do this, are you?
He stepped back.
Just walk away.
Another crash. This one sounded like glass breaking or something more substantial.
Christ, that kid is being destroyed!
Knowing this, could he really walk away and let the kid die, or who knows what else? A holler, then silence. That was it. He was going in. He braced himself, then leaned forward with his shoulder and charged through the door ready for a fight. Standing before him, breathing heavily, blood streaming from his nose, stood the dark-haired teen. He glared at Cash, his face contorted with rage. Behind him, the metal stall was bent and twisted in on itself. Overhead, the cold fluorescent light buzzed and flickered. The creepy man lay at his feet, unconscious, on the cool tile floor. A pool of crimson spread out from the wound on his head. Behind Cash, the metal door swung closed with an eerie creak. The teen stared with a cold, challenging eye. No fear, no guilt. Not a hint of remorse. Just a glare, questioning Cash if he were going to be a problem too. He bent over the unconscious man's body and pulled the wallet from his back pocket. Ignoring Cash, he set his focus on the contents.
Well, Dennis, you suck.
The teen's voice bounced off the tile walls. It was deep, much deeper than one would expect from one so young. He flipped the bifold to the floor, smirking. He folded the money and stuffed it in the pocket of his camouflage pants. Ah, a sense of humor Cash could work with.
You know,
Said Cash.
You should go through all the pockets.
He grinned mischievously as he approached the troll on the floor. The kid flashed an evil grin, then stepped back, allowing Cash to rifle through the rest of the creepy man's pockets. A pocket knife, a vial of what appeared to be coke, and car keys.
I'm Finn,
said the teen, as he reached out his hand. Cash. He looked over Finn, noting the blood and unfastened leather belt.
You okay?
Finn nodded and buckled his belt. He studied his reflection in the mirror, turned on the water, and used a paper towel to clean away the blood from his face. As they left the restroom, Cash trotted over to the cleaning closet. He pulled out a yellow caution sign and placed it in front of the door. Under the tree, the blonde teen finally took notice. A questioning look of concern spread across his face. He got to his feet.
Time to go,
Finn said calmly. Cash tossed the keys into the overgrown grass. Without another word, the trio walked off into the brush, leaving the rest stop behind. Cash buckled his belt, made his way back to the fire, and reclaimed his seat alongside River. Zach handed him the flask. He took a drink, and passed it along. Finn and Teague were messing around again, off in their own little world. He wondered what it would be like to have such a close partner in life. He watched River as she laughed with Beth. The orange light from the fire cast a warm glow on her features, highlighting that little dimple. A wayward dread fell across her face. She brushed it aside. He pulled out a baggie of weed and rolled a joint. "So, Cash," said Beth, "what's your story?" He took a hit, exhaled, and placed his hand against his chest. Shaking his head, he replied,
My story? Nah, I don't have a story. Seriously, I grew up in Spokane. Before I met these guys, I used to think my life sucked. My family sucked. I was absolutely convinced that I had the shittiest existence ever. I realize now that my parents were just poor working class. They didn't have a whole lot of options or opportunities. In hindsight, it wasn't really all that bad.
"How did you start hopping trains?" Beth took a hit. He ran his fingers through his hair.
Well, like I said, I believed that life would be better anywhere that wasn't home. One day, after yet another argument with my old man, I met up with some nomads who were heading to Seattle, so I hitched along. I was hooked.
Thinking of home brought no strong feelings. It was almost depressing how little thought he put into his life before. To him, it was as though that was just a placeholder period, a temporary scene, one where he waited until he was big enough, smart enough, strong enough, to get out on his own. "Have you spoken to your dad since?" asked Beth. Cash nodded.
Yeah, I didn't do it for a year. Then, I don't know.
He shrugged.
Whatever negative feelings I had toward him were just gone.
He thought about how he felt the day he left, the anger and frustration. With each hop, the rush of new places and new experiences changed his state of mind, his state of being. The negative emotions evaporated, leaving behind no trace, like a morning dew in warm sunlight. Over time, he saw the world much more clearly. He understood his parents a little more.
I called him one Sunday morning. I knew the old man was going to be home. He loved to sleep in and lounge around that day,
He said,
Anyway, he picked up, and to my surprise, he wasn't an ass. Instead, he talked to me like a man, not like a stupid kid. It was the best conversation we ever had. We talked for hours. Until my phone battery died.
Have you been home since?
Yeah, several times.
Replied Cash.
For a day or two, even brought these guys a couple times.
River smiled.
His mom made some great meals for us. I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed watching his old man kick his ass in poker.
Laughed Zach. Cash had to laugh at that one. His dad was probably the only person who knew he could always beat him at cards. No real surprise there. He was the person who taught him how to play. Finn stood up and reached his hand out for Teague. Pulling him to his feet, he said,
On that note, we're going to bed now. Good night, y'all.
They walked over to their tent.
Try to keep the noise down so we can sleep,
Finn said, as he held the tent flap open and gestured for Teague. Finn crawled inside the tent. Cash called out,
Keep the noise down? Us? You seem to forget who makes all the noise around here at night.
Laughter. Finn let the tent flap fall. Then reached his hand out and flipped them all off. More laughter. Everyone else remained by the fire until the moonshine ran out. As the flames waned, River and Beth made their way to the tent where they settled in for the night. Cash staggered over to his hammock. Within minutes, he was fast asleep.